life is out of control. My name is Arlene, and I'm a Christian in recovery from drugs and alcohol and codependency. Hi, friends. So glad to be here tonight. You know, when I got clean and sober on November 27th, 1985, I was 27 years old, and the main subject that I was interested in was me. I was very interested in me. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous was right on target in describing my entire problem, which was selfishness and self-centeredness. Now, selfishness meant that everything I did or said was aimed to benefit me and me alone. That was selfishness. And self-centeredness meant that I was all I ever thought about. Now, I don't think that I was much different than any other person just getting newly sober. I'm not beating myself up about this. Selfishness and self-centeredness really is the root of all of our troubles before getting into recovery, and it still plagues most of us after we've been in recovery a while. At least it still plagues me quite a bit. And this seems to be true. I mean, the selfishness and self-centeredness problem that we have seems to be true no matter what we are recovering from. I mean, I happen to be a drug addict and an alcoholic, but it's also true of me as a codependent because I like to help people. In fact, I over-help people because of my own need to be needed, right? It's all about me, really, right? And it's true of food addicts, sex addicts, control freaks, and the rest, right? All of us. Selfishness and self-centeredness seems to be the universal root problem of those who, like me, need recovery for a variety of things. Now, it took a few years for me to get serious about my recovery. It took a few years for me to get serious about working the 12 steps. But when I finally did, I went at them with gusto. You know why? Because I was finally sick and tired of seeing everyone else get happy, joyous, and free, and me being left in the dust. They were working their 12-step programs, and I finally wanted some of that happiness myself. You see, it was all about me. It was all about me. So really, I can't take much credit for working the 12 steps because, 12 steps of recovery wasn't some virtue in my life. It wasn't about anything else except for me. It was about me. I wanted to stay sober. I wanted to be happier. I wanted better relationships. I was tired of my misery. I wanted a better life. Me, 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 me. In fact, even finding a higher power and turning my life and will over to the care of God wasn't really about God at all. It was really about me. If submitting to God would help me, then I was all for it. Again, I don't think I'm much different than really most folks coming into recovery about that. But just because I wasn't much different doesn't mean that I wasn't still very, very misguided. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. In any case, I worked the 12 steps finally, and eventually I got to steps 8 and 9, which is where we are now in the recovery year here on Friday nights. We go through the 12 steps in 12 months, and here we are at step 8 going into August. We're about right on time. If you're new today, if you've only been here a few times, don't worry about coming in at the middle. You are here right on time, I guarantee you. Glad you're here, glad you're joining us. Keep coming back, it works. You'll catch on, you'll catch up, never fear. Glad you're here. But anyway, eventually I got to steps 8 and 9 in my own program, and so let's read them together. We did it just a second ago with Rochelle and Ruben, but let's read them together again along with the Bible verses that go along with them. Go. Step 8. We made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Luke 6:31. And step 9. We made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Matthew 5:23 and 24. Okay, so these steps 8 and 9, when I finally got there, I felt were all about making amends and restitution for the wreckage I had caused in my active addiction, so that I could stay clean and sober. And since, I wanted to stay clean and sober at that point, I worked these steps. In step 8, I started off by making a list of those I had harmed. This list wasn't too hard to find. This list came from my fourth step inventory that I had done, because I had done a fourth step, and I'd written down, all of this stuff. And so I had a lot of people on that list, so I just took it right off of my four-step inventory. I had already shared it with my sponsor, and I'd known what my character defects were in steps 6 and 7. And so it was pretty easy to pick out who I had harmed after I went through all those steps. In fact, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous really gives practically no direction whatsoever on working the 8th step. It's like 4 lines. On page 76, the big book simply says this. It says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we had harmed and to whom we were willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory, and we subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. That's it. That's all it says. That's all the info we get about step 8 before the book launches into actually talking about making the amends on our list in step 9. For step 8, it just says that we appraise ourselves, and then we make a list of folks we had harmed. And basically, we did that, right? It's like step 6 and 7. We know all about our character defects, and now we make this list of people that we had harmed. Easy peasy. So I made the list. And I was actually willing. I really was. I was willing to make amends to these people. Remember, I really wanted to stay sober. I had had some bad experiences in sobriety before working the steps, and I really wanted to stay sober. So that was where my willingness came from. I was willing to do it. And then I went on to actually making the amends to the people on the list. I did it. I did all kinds of things. I called them up. I paid back money. I apologized to people. I could tell you all about those things. I wrote letters, all kinds of amends. And all of this I did while not even having the slightest idea of what I was actually working towards. See, I thought I was doing all of this to stay clean and sober. I thought it was all about me. When the truth be told, the only way I was going to get and stay clean and sober was to get away from only thinking about me. The only way I was going to stay clean and sober was to actually get out of myself. Concentrating on me was the problem, not the solution. Selfishness could not produce selflessness. See, I was doing all the right things. I was doing the amends. I was doing all the right things, but I was doing it for the wrong reason. I was doing it for the wrong reason. See, the process of working the 12 steps of recovery in order, 1 through 12, is actually designed to bring us out of self-centeredness and into God-centeredness. That's our entire journey to healing. The steps are just a stairway away from ourselves and towards God. The big book of AA states this. It states lack of power was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that is exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself that'll solve your problem. See, when we're God-centered, God thinks about us, and then we're freed up to think about God and other people. God's job is to think about me. My job is to think about God and other people. See, when I remember this job description, then I'm actually in the program then. And then I am secure from relapse. But when I expect God to kind of just go out there and fend for himself and take care of others, while I'm just concentrating on doing all this for me, I have the roles all mixed up. See, but I didn't know this when I first worked the steps. I had no idea about this. I did not know it. I thought it was all about my life getting better, even though there were countless ways the big book told me otherwise. For instance, when it said on page 77, at this moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is what? Read it to me, with me. To fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. I mean, that's clear, right? It's pretty clear. But I didn't get it. Nonetheless, working steps 8 and 9 is the turn that we take away from ourselves into this brand new way of life. Because I want you to notice that in steps 1 through 7, they don't have much to do with our actual interactions with other people. We write down a lot of things maybe about other people, and maybe we talk to one other person, like our sponsor, about things. Other than mentioning that we share our inventory of wrongs and defects with the sponsor in step 5, there's really no interacting with other people whatsoever. It's all lists and prayers up to that point. But now in steps 8 and 9, we're going to have to interact with people of the world. In the 12 steps in the 12 traditions book of AA, in the chapter about the 8th step where we make an amends list, it reminds me, since defective relations with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, can anybody say, yeah, including our alcoholism? No field of investigation could yield more satisfying and valuable rewards than this one. So now in step 8, I finally turn away from myself, outward towards others, beginning this journey away from the old selfish me and towards the new living for God and others me. So in the next few short minutes, I want to answer this short question. Who goes on my 8th step list and why? Who goes on my 8th step list and why? We're going to fill in 4 blanks for who goes on the list, and then I want to answer why at the end. Just remember that this is something that you're doing with your sponsor, right? I mean, we are not working our steps here, right? We understand that, right? We're just finding out about the steps. Everybody gets that, right? You're going to do this with your sponsor. Say yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm taking the first 4 fill in the blanks of these categories of people who go on your 8th step list from the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then there's a 5th one we're going to add. But here's the first category of people who go on our list. First fill in the blank, number 1, those people I have hurt physically. Those people I have hurt physically. I mean, it's obvious that physically means like harming people with physical violence. I think that's the obvious part. But it also includes folks that we've harmed materially. Materially is also physically by, let's say, not providing for their physical needs or not providing money or support to those entrusted to our care, our children, our family. Stealing falls into this category, by the way, even stealing from people who deserved it or who stole from us first, right? Also on this list are people who had to support us, which left them less able to support themselves, like parents and spouses and even ex-spouses, you know. Second, who goes on my 8th step list? Number 2, those people I have hurt mentally. Physically, but then also mentally. People we've gossiped about. Maybe they don't even know we've done it. I can relate to that. People who we've put down, made them think badly about themselves. People we've paid back evil for evil rather than breaking the pattern of evil. You know, what our mama said was true. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Say yeah. People who have cared about us, that we occupied way too much space in their heads, and they had to put way too much energy into their brains thinking about us because of our antics. Who had to think of ways to get us out of our messes. Right? Bosses go on this list. Co-workers can go on a list. Here's some. probation officers, judges, cops, and detox workers, halfway house runners, right? We drove them all to drink, didn't we? Third, on my 8-step list are those people I've hurt emotionally. Physically, mentally, but also emotionally. And this may be the biggest category, at least for me. I mean, this was the big category for me. Parents, siblings, friends who have worried and cried over us. Many times our kids go on this list. I know mine had to. People who hurt me, so I hurt them back with words or actions because I thought that they deserved it. People who were scared of us or scared for us or worried for us or angry at us or all sorts of negative emotions that they wouldn't have had if it wasn't for us. Even when we think that they hurt us emotionally first, if we hurt them back emotionally, they go on the list. And last but not least, from the 12 and 12, anyway, number 4, those people I have harmed spiritually go on that list. And actually, this isn't really a different category at all, because each person we cause harm to physically, mentally, and emotionally, we've actually also harmed spiritually, because rather than being a man or a woman of God, showing the love of God through our words and actions to these people, instead, anytime we treated anyone with any kind of disrespect, we were actually helping to pull them further away from God rather than pushing them towards God, right? And remember what we said, that the Big Book told us earlier, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and others, and we can't do that if we're harming people spiritually, right? Now there's one more important category for our 8th step list, and write this down, number 5, those people I need to forgive for harming me. Those people I need to forgive for harming me. You know, there's a little saying in the program of recovery, and it's very true. It goes like this: hurt people hurt people. What this means is that although it's true that defective relations are at the core of our problems, as the 12 Steps and 12 Tradition book says, usually those defective relations began when we were young. A lot of times we were hurt by people who were supposed to protect us. We became hurt people. Sometimes these people who hurt us were our parents or teachers or pastors or brothers or sisters or relatives. Sometimes we were hurt by abandonment, sometimes abuse. And these hurts were very deep. And because of these hurts, we became hurt people who hurt people. But this is the deal. It's not just true for us. This hurt people is true for everybody who's walking around in the world today. Hurt people have hurt us. The antidote to stop that is to be able to forgive people who have hurt us so that they can be set free, and so can we. And the only way this can be done is by asking God to heal us from our hurts and asking Him to bless and heal those who hurt us so they don't have to continue their pattern of being hurt people who hurt people. Because the chances are really great that if they hurt us, at some point they were hurt themselves. They need Jesus as much as we do. All of these categories of people need to be on our 8th step list. And then I promised to tell you who was going to be on the list, and then I promised to tell you why. And so I'm going to tell you why. But before I do that, let's remember this. Selfishness won't combat selfishness. Selfishness can't combat selfishness. It may seem that selfishness is only human. You go, but wait, I'm only being human. Yeah, so many humans suffer from it, so it's just normal. We're all selfish. But it's not true that selfishness is normal. It's not true that selfishness is human. Selfishness actually makes us less than human, because God created all humanity in His own image. All of us are brothers and sisters with God as our Father, to love one another as He has loved us. His perfect plan for each and every one of us was to love one another as He has loved us. When all His children love one another, it pleases God, just like it pleases me when people like my children and treat them well, and when my kids get along, right? Remember the Bible verse that goes along with step 8. Say it again with me. It's on the screen. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Luke 6:31. That's pretty clear. See, when we don't love one another, we're being less than human. And because of our lack of love of people, what happens is we get separated from God's love. We put up these barriers to God's grace in our lives. And God doesn't stop loving us, but we've built so many walls against him when we don't love others that we can't seem to access that love. And you know what? That's bad for me. When I can't access God's love, this is bad for me. I like to say that for the rest of humanity, I don't know about the rest of you guys, maybe when you're mean to one another and selfish and self-centered, and maybe just the rest of humanity, when they do that, they just build walls and stay separated from God's love, their results are different from mine. For them, maybe they just live hard-hearted lives. Me, when I'm separated from God's grace, I drink myself to death or use drugs and I die. My first step reminds me that I am 100% hopeless apart from divine help. I am powerless on my own against my hurts, habits, hang-ups, addictions, and afflictions. I need to be close to God. I simply can't afford to build up walls against God. They're suicide for me. So here's my amends story, which is when I learned, when it came clear to me what the amends steps were really about. This is when the light bulb just came on that it was actually not all about me. This is when I learned the real reason that I was working the amends step and actually stepped into the program of recovery. So when I got sober, it was in Texas. I got sober in Texas, and I had to get a job. I had to get a real job, a job that wasn't illegal that I could tell my mother about. You getting me? So a friend of mine named CJ from the trailer park I lived in worked at this really big law firm in Houston that was opening a new little branch in Dallas. So she told me to apply for a receptionist job, and I did. The memory of how I acted in that interview still pains me to think of it to this day. But somehow I got the job, probably out of pity, and I'm sure a lot of help from my friend CJ. Now, this was an awesome time for me in recovery. It was fun. I had a good job. I was learning a lot. I could dress like a professional. I really liked that a lot. I didn't have any office skills whatsoever, so I had to go to typing school, and I did that eventually. In the nearly 3 years I worked there, the firm grew to 10 lawyers. They moved to a big and really cool high-rise downtown office. It was so fun to be part of that. I went on to paralegal school. I became a paralegal. I loved that job. I loved those people. I was so loyal. I was so grateful to them, and they loved me. It was amazing. Everything was wonderful, so I thought. Well, one day some official-looking people came from the home office in Houston, and they called me into the conference room, and they sat me down, and they fired me. They gave me no reason. They said, "We're letting you go." They escorted me to my desk. I cleaned it out, and then they escorted me out of the building, and they dumped me out on the sidewalk holding my cardboard box full of stuff. I was totally devastated. I had no idea what had just happened. I had 2 little kids, I had an apartment, I had no job. I was scared, I was humiliated. And my heart was broken too because I loved those people. These were my friends, that job. I had been so loyal. Well, I got another job. Life went on. But I always held a piece of hurt in my heart about why I was fired from that job. And every job I had from then on, which was several, I held this sliver of fear about that the same thing could happen because I didn't know what I had done to get fired. Maybe I would do it again. Maybe the same thing would happen again. Why had they kicked me out? I had no idea. Life went on. Fast forward a few years. I was living in California at the time, and one day I got this battered letter in the mail. I had lived several places in that few years, so the letter had been forwarded from place to place to place to actually reach me. This was 1990, remember? There was no email. There was only snail mail. Okay, this is when God was a child. Now the letter was from my old friend CJ, who had got me that receptionist job in Dallas. And when I opened it, what I found just shocked me because it was an amends letter. It seems that CJ was an alcoholic, which I knew. I knew that. She was my friend, hello. But what I didn't know is that she had, in the ensuing years, entered a 12-step recovery program in AA, and she was on her amends steps. And the letter went on to say that she had been very jealous of my recovery as I kept staying sober during those years when I was at that firm. And she really didn't think I was going to stay sober, but I had, because she was still an active alcoholic. That bugged her. And out of her jealousy, she had, unbeknownst to me, slandered my name at that law firm. She had lied to them about my performance to the degree that they came and they fired me. CJ had gotten me fired out of jealousy. And now she was writing to say that she was sorry. What could she do to make it up to me? When I read that letter, immediately I had this sense of immense peace. I finally knew why I had been fired. It wasn't my fault. I had no hard feelings towards CJ. I only had gratitude of this gift that she had given me. It was peace. The unrest I had carried in my soul was put to rest. And that's when I realized why I was supposed to work steps 8 and 9. It was because I had hurt people. I had created in them a sense of unrest. And it was my job to restore them to peace the best I could. I wasn't working these steps for me. I was working them for them. I had hurt them. I had taken something from them. And it wasn't nice to harm people. My job was to make it right as much as I could so they could experience a new sense of peace and rest that CJ had given me. And then, as an excellent byproduct of my caring about another person's peace through making amends, my portal to God would stay open, and he would continue to be able to provide me with sobriety. Here's the deal. If we choose to keep going in recovery in this process, eventually we're going to be looking step 12 in the face. We're having had a spiritual awakening. We tell others about it. We're going to proclaim to those who are still sick and suffering that we found a higher power named Jesus who saved us through these steps. We're going to embody the purpose of the big book to find a higher power, and we're going to proclaim to people that while we were hopeless, our higher power, who we call Jesus, got a hold of us, and we are different. And we're going to promise them, these other people, you can be different too. Eventually, we're going to get to fill people with hope. As the Bible says, while they were still sinners, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Eventually, we're going to get to do these things. We're going to get to that. And that's why we're recovering. That's our purpose. And hear me, nobody will ever get to know about the love of Jesus and how he has changed our lives and how he can change their lives if you and I don't act differently than the world does when it comes to those who have harmed us, when it comes to those we have harmed. That's why steps 8 and 9 are really the steps of love. They're the steps of love. Step 8 is the list of love. Because when we offer amends and forgiveness, we offer love, especially to those who are unlovable. When we're humble and willing to do whatever it takes to make things right with people, then we live out the real purpose of our recovery program. Remember what it is? Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be maximum service to God and the people around us. And more importantly, we live out being fully human, fully alive. In John 13, 34 through 35, we hear from Jesus what our purpose is in his own words. Read it with me. It's on the screen. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. As the band comes up, we're going to sing a song. And I want you to come to the altar tonight and consider that Jesus has a higher purpose for your recovery than just you. He has a higher purpose for your recovery than just getting your kids back or getting off probation or getting out of halfway or getting more money together to get a place. It's much better than that. He has a higher purpose for your recovery than just you feeling better. You are a disciple of Jesus, armed with his power to help change people's lives. And steps 8 and 9 of the 12 steps are the steps of love, the turning point away from ourselves and towards others. And that'll get us there. So tonight, come to the altar and consider that. Think about that. And thank Jesus for such a beautiful calling when you don't deserve it one little bit. And neither do I. The altar is open.